Welcome to Connect the Plots with Cylia and Erik, a podcast about the stories that connect us.
3, 2, 1, and we're live. I'm Eric Grove, and I'm a writer, and this is my friend Cylia, and she's a reader. We are joined today with SOVAS Nominated SAG-AFTRA audiobook narrator Gary Bennett. I think I did that justice. Just mostly? Okay. You can correct me in a second here. Gary is kind of connected in some ways to the origin of this podcast, though I want to hear Gary's perspective on it. The version of it that I've heard or experienced was that I was at a party at NorwestCon about 2 years ago, and Cylia, as she likes to do, pushed me into a conversation and then exited and gave me space to have that conversation. And I believe Gary was the recipient of where Cylia went and started chatting after she did that. So you basically like pushed me and then turned to Gary. So I think we both got ambushed a little bit there. Do you remember this?
That actually is pretty close. I was just standing there minding my own business, trying to drink, and I had a drink in one hand and a snack in the other in this tiny crowded little room at the top of the hotel where NorwestCon was being held, and all of a sudden this girl bumps into me and starts chatting me up about books. And I thought, okay, we're at a book con, so yeah, let's talk books. And one thing led to another. We quickly realized we have a lot of commonalities in what we like and what we really want to read, and then it turns out that I let her know that I'm actually not an author. I was kind of crashing the party as an audiobook narrator, and then that set off a whole another big conversation, and I think somewhere in that conversation, the idea of making some sort of a discussion and maybe a podcast, perhaps, that talks about books and other stuff, kind of lit the fire. And I thought, yeah, great idea. I'm all for it.
And here you are.
And here I am.
I think you may have brought up the idea of a podcast, and I immediately poo-pooed it. So, oh no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I don't know tech stuff.
And yet now here we are.
And here we are. Yeah,
well,
not quite 2 years. It was NorwestCon 2025.
Okay.
Was it 2025?
Well, two NorwestCons ago. Yeah. NorwestCon is a full year.
Yeah.
It's
a unit of time. One NorwestCon.
Gary, do you go to NorwestCon on a regular basis?
This last one was held about a month ago, and I think it was I want to say my fourth one. Each year it gets it's kind of cool because the first one I went in and I was actually on a audiobook discussion panel, talking about audiobooks, which was, I want to say that was the first time I had ever done anything like that. It was kind of a really cool experience, getting up in front of people who wanted to know all about kind of get a peek behind the curtains. And then each year subsequently, I've been participating in more and more, and the audiobook track has grown exponentially over the past couple of years. So I think this year, personally, I was involved in, I want to say, 5 or 6 different panels, and there are a few that I couldn't squeeze into my schedule. So it's a great opportunity to seat ourselves within this amazing author community, and kind of give our perspective of another avenue for them to get the word out.
Yeah. Sorry, Cylia, go ahead.
No. I was going to dive into the questions, but if you have a follow-up, you go.
No, why don't we? I'll interject as we go, as is my way.
Perfect. Well, as is becoming the norm in our interviews, and I think I did ask you this, at least touched on it in our origin story meeting conversation. But what we really are curious about is what is in your book DNA. What are the stories that first started building the structure of who you are today?
That's such a great question. 3 main tracks kind of pop out in my head. First of all, I am a lifelong sci-fi enthusiast, so sci-fi is probably my first love. And in that vein, I went through all of Asimov very early on, probably 6th, 7th grade. I kind of latched onto that and just devoured.
So more than just the Foundation series.
More than yes, Foundation and all the Robots series and I think there's, I don't know, I probably have, I've got all the hardbacks in my library behind me, and there's probably 8 or 9 books. Loved them all. Absolutely fell in love with the genre. Fell in love with the idea of science fiction. And actually before that, even science fiction was in my blood because I grew up in my grandma's living room watching old reruns of Star Trek, and so this is right up my alley. So that's probably the main track. Secondary to that, fantasy, the Dragon Riders of Pern. I think I latched onto that not far or maybe in parallel with Asimov, and just absolutely fell in love with the idea of these fantastical, strange worlds with these wonderful, cool dragons and all sorts of fun story arcs and everything. So that was extremely cool. And then branching off in kind of in the same vein, Tolkien, The Hobbit. I read that. I remember sitting in the library in 8th grade with my buddy, and we just leaned up against the bookshelves and just read that every lunch hour during the day. So that's kind of, I would say that was the basis for my book DNA, those 3 themes.
I do want to point out that Dragon Riders of Pern is science fiction. At every prologue, she does bring up that they are in the Ruckbot sector and they are space colonists, and the dragons were genetically engineered from fire lizards.
You're right. Okay, you got me. Yes.
No, it is.
You're right. Absolutely right.
Yes.
Mission. Now I remember that. Now.
It's an extremely common thing.
There's a dragon on the cover. It's got to be fantasy.
It's got to be fantasy, right? Yes. Yeah. Yes. No, that's absolutely right.
Once more, I will say, put a dragon in your spaceship. That's where they belong.
Now, I haven't read all of the Dragon Riders of Pern series, but are there actual, like, full-on spaceships that appear? Or is that more background?
Oh, no.
I honestly don't remember.
They're not in the original trilogy, and they're not in the Harper Hall series.
But ultimately,
however,
if you follow along. There is canonical
written by Anne McCaffrey where they rediscover and get it back up to the space station, which is the repurposed spaceship.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like I need to reread those. Put them on my TBR.
Got them all right there.
I think at this point, if we don't have a Dragon Riders of Pern mention in an interview episode, something has gone awry.
It's one of our central connecting red lines, right?
And I think for me, it's Star Trek. You know, like, because I'm also like a Star Trek person. Like, that's where I started out. Mm-hmm. And so like there are probably maybe like 6 or 7 things at this point that get brought up, and we go like, yeah, that seems to be a shared experience.
Yeah, right.
It varies a little bit based upon when people grew up, but there are some pretty strong common properties that seem to have ignited the imaginations of a lot of people.
I love it. That's awesome.
Do you have were there any particular stories that led you to being a narrator, and what genre do you currently narrate most often?
Excellent question. Yes. So I've been an audiobook listener for years. Probably, I don't know when Audible first came on the scene, but when it did, I think I was right there towards the beginning. And one of the first series that both my wife and I listened every summer when we hit the road for family vacation, we would always fire up the Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn, narrated by the inimitable Luke Daniels. And it was like coming home. Every summer we came home and we put that on the car stereo, and we listened to the adventures of Oberon and Atticus, and it was just so wonderful. And then at some point, much later on, when I decided when I was transitioning out of my old career into trying to find something else to do, it occurred to me that audiobook narration was a career. People actually did that for a living, and it was like a light bulb moment. I said, holy crap, people get to read these stories in front of a microphone and bring them to life, and they do that for a living. And I thought, wow, that was my mind was blown, for sure, because it never occurred to me before that. I was just a listener. I was just engrossed in each story. But then when I had the opportunity to be the person bringing audience listeners into the story the way I was, it was just a magical moment.
So, from my perspective as an audience member that doesn't know the history or the industry very well, it seems like audiobooks. There's been an increase in accessibility and an increase in the number of narrators, and kind of in both fashions. There's been an increase in quality and in diversity of narrators, kind of spurred a lot by technology. I remember growing up, and people would have an audiobook, but it'd be like a giant box of tapes.
Right. Books on tape. Yep.
And
Yep.
most of the books that were created that way, on audiobook that way, they were abridged. They were often abridged, and they were often, like, to get that giant box of books on tape was kind of very expensive.
Yeah.
As I recall, and it really seems like in the last, the career that you've made your name in now, it seems like that career didn't exist 20 years ago in the same fashion. Am I
certainly not in the
correct
same
about that?
fashion? When books on tape was in its heyday, literally books on tape, actors, narrators went into studios, whether
Yeah.
they lived in New York or LA or London, and they went into studios and they recorded these audiobooks. I don't even know if audiobooks was even a term back then. They recorded the books on tape, and then they would go back home and do whatever they did. But everything was done at a central studio location. And then at some point, the advent of the internet and the advent of connectivity and being able to work from home, especially I think in the probably mid 2010s-ish era, people really started to start recording. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think somewhere in that period, people started being able to record from home. They built home studios, and they were, instead of having to travel to studios in the city, if they didn't live in New York or London or LA, they had the ability to record from home, and because of the wonderful internet, they could send their files off to editors and to publishers over the internet. And that was a huge transition in how audiobooks were made. And then, of course, a few years further down the road, COVID hit, and everybody was stuck inside. And at that point, I had already started. I was 2 or 3 years into the industry by that time. So I tell people would complain about having to isolate at home, and said I'd isolate at home every day. I've been training for this. But at that point, because everybody was forced into home, they were looking for other means of making an income. And of course, audiobooks, everybody's doing audiobooks now. Let's do it. I don't have anywhere to go. I can't go anywhere, so I can record from home. And at that point, the market was literally flooded with new narrators and actors who couldn't go into studios and do film work or TV work. They transitioned to audiobook work and voice work. And so it became much more competitive at that point, and much harder to secure work. But I've been very lucky in my career to be able to have stayed extremely busy throughout that entire period and to continue to do so. So.
Yeah, it really seems like the barriers to entry were reduced once the equipment cost, you didn't have to have a full studio. You could create like headphones and a mic and as well as the software and of course the internet connectivity that you brought up. And it does seem like those are the industry disruptors, right? When things, when home computers happened versus just the huge interfaces in hospital server basements, which was my familiarity with it just because I'm in healthcare. But, it used to be that you had to be able to host like a server room in order to truly use computers well. And now everyone's got a computer in their pocket.
Right.
If they have a smartphone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that strikes me that's particularly interesting about the kind of an audiobook, maybe renaissance, maybe that's not the right word, but the increase in it is that there's a paired connection to that, which is it's a lot easier for people to listen to audiobooks. It's a lot easier for people to listen to audiobooks while they're doing things that may not have been as easy to do before. I know, like, my wife will listen to audiobooks while she's gardening or while she's doing some sort of chore that doesn't require a tremendous amount of focus. It gives the ability to kind of ingest story in different ways, and that's where I think our podcast becomes very interested. Is what does that mean for the nature of stories? I know that there's an anecdote that I've read from John Scalzi talking about how he changed his writing style after he heard Will Wheaton narrate Red Shirts.
Right.
And I know that, like, it's that I see this, like, there's some of my Mary Robinette Kowal, who is an audiobook narrator and a writer. I can see the change in her writing the more she narrates, and like, it's an interesting thing, like the way that audiobooks influence story and the way that the increase in consumption of audiobooks changes the expectations of story. Have you experienced that in your time have you started noticing books being a little bit different as you've received them?
I haven't really seen that as much. And maybe that's because a lot of the work I do is either back titles or titles that are just not at that forefront. But I think it is interesting because just the awareness of the audiobook industry as a whole, I think, is absolutely having an influence on authors in general. In fact, at NorwestCon, we had a discussion about this very topic, about how to, geared toward authors, how to make your work more audio accessible, make it more friendly for audiobook listeners, make it maybe easier for audiobook narrators to record. Don't include all these huge long names and hard to pronounce places and whatnot. But it is absolutely having, I think, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship, because books grew and then audiobooks grew, and then as they grow together, they're kind of intertwined and kind of helping the other grow even more.
So you narrate across multiple genres.
I do.
If I remember right, thrillers, self-help books, science fiction, and fantasy. Do you find that your style of narrating changes based on the genre?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And part of that is just because of the expectations of the listener. A thriller listener wants to hear books narrated in a certain style, and in self-help, obviously, they're not going to want to hear the self-help have the narrator voice a task that they need to do in the style.
You don't want a lot of tension building.
No tension, no cliffhangers, nothing like that. So yeah, that's absolutely, each genre deserves its own its own treatment on how the narrator approaches the work.
I have had the blessing of having some of my work adapted into audio as a writer, and I've also been in a situation where I've had like samples to pick from, where they've had multiple audiobook narrators do samples, and then I can kind of weigh in and give my opinion on things. And I think what's most exciting for me as an author when I hear an audiobook narrator adapt my work is when they bring out aspects of it or accentuate aspects of it that I would not necessarily have thought. So I have a story that was in Nightmare magazine, and an audiobook narrator did an adaptation of that particular story. And the way that I describe the way that I read the story is that the narrator is more pensive and slow, and the way that he does the narration, the narrator sounds extremely angry. And the anger that he manages to soak into his voice opens up a whole nother avenue of the story. So while I listened to it and I was like, wow, that's not the way I ever read that story. Yeah. And I've read that story live, in workshops. I've read that story at readings. I've read that story 100 times. That's not how I read the story, but that is a new iteration of the story that involves that collaborative approach. I think the performance aspect that gets brought, like the storytelling instincts that audiobook narrators are bringing to the book, are easy for people who don't pay very close attention to dismiss. Like you have to make what is your process? You're given a book and you're gonna read it. How much of the book do you read before you even begin narrating? How many of those choices, storytelling choices, like how these voices are gonna sound, how much of that pre-work are you doing before you get into the microphone?
So I'm always it depends on the book. If it's a brand new work to me, I'll do a lot more pre-read and prep than if it's book 10 in a series, because I'm already familiar with the characters and kind of the story arc. But in every case, I'm at least skimming, if not completely reading through the book prior to recording, just to get a feel for the tone, for the story, where it goes, where the characters go, how the characters live in that story, so that I can accurately bring them out as I'm recording. Voice work, the voices of the characters, sometimes I'll have a clear idea of what a character will sound like while I'm doing that pre-read. Sometimes they come out in the moment when I'm behind the mic doing the actual recording. And those ones are kind of the more fun ones, I think, because they almost take me by surprise at how I voice them, because I didn't have anything in mind while I was doing the pre-read or the prep. And so those are pretty fun, but there's always a definite amount of prep before I even step into the booth with a new book.
So is that when a voice just kind of rises up in the moment, do you attribute that to like, experience and instincts, or is that just a fully random, like, oh, this guy's gonna be a little Irish, like what is?
Hopefully, it's more the former than the latter, but no, I don't. You have to be very careful when selecting a voice, and one of my good friends and mentors and coaches likes to recite a personal story that he went through. Is he was doing this series of books, and in the middle of the first book, this little minor character maybe had 2 or 3 lines, and he went full bore on voicing this character as outrageously as he could. I think he had asthma or something, and he just gave him a really strong wheeze as he voiced the character, because it was just a throwaway character. The moral of this story is there are never throwaway characters. So that particular character showed up as the main character in like book 3 of the series. And so he had to be consistent and voice the entire book with this horrible wheeze. And it was a hard lesson learned. But he's been happy to pass that lesson off to us who haven't had to go through that personally. So yeah, there's some thought that you have to put into to bringing these characters to life and giving them voices to make them make them real. I mean, they're real people. We like to say that the characters in the book don't know they're in the book. They're just characters. They're living their lives, doing their things at the author's whim, but they're still doing it. And so they're not caricatures at all. And you want to make sure to steer way clear of giving characters any sort of cartoonish voice. But at the same time, you also want to give them some uniqueness that fits that character, what their background is, what their emotions are at the particular scene or whatever.
Now that you read books for a living out loud, do you find that your total book consumption has increased or decreased? Like, do you still read for fun, or is that work and so you just...
The amount of books I consume has at least doubled, if not tripled or quadrupled, since I started this career, because I'm reading the books that I'm recording, but I still love books. I can never stop reading. Most of my reading for pleasure occurs through my ears and not my eyes, and so I do a heck of a lot of listening to audiobooks. And I do it for a couple reasons. I do it because I love listening. I love the audiobook experience. I love listening to books and getting engrossed in the stories. But I'm also, since I started doing this for a living, I've noticed that I'm listening with a much more critical ear. So I'm listening for cues that the actor has infused into each one of these scenes and each one of these characters and how they did that. And oh, that's a cool thing that he did there.
So there's a craft piece of your brain that's turned on still.
Absolutely, yeah. That's never turns off, which is kind of another double-edged sword, if you will.
Because I mean, as an author, that's super relatable because it's hard for me to read a book and not do the same thing.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I remember one of the once I found out during that initial conversation that you're a narrator, one of the first ones we talked about was Ray Porter's reading of Project Hail Mary and how I was over the moon. And now the movie's come out and like there's all of these other new audience members being introduced to it. What do you think was so compelling about Ray's rendition of that story?
Oh my God, where to begin? He is a master among masters. He truly is. He puts you in the shoes and the spacesuit of the main character and never lets you go. You are that character as you're wandering through the spaceship trying to figure out how to save the universe, figure out how you got there in the first place, figure out what this weird alien rock guy is across the way. He just infuses so much emotion and so much just feeling and just being into the performance that it's something that performance in particular, and I'm a huge Ray fan to begin with, long before he did Project Hail Mary, and so he is one of the narrators that I aspire to become.
I think I also, in the same conversation, mentioned that without staying focused on the positive, there are audiobook narrators that I bounced off the book, and so I try and give the visual book a try. Mm-hmm. And once I find a good narrator, it leads me to books I wouldn't have otherwise tried. Like one of my favorite series by Michelle West is the Sun Sword and House War series, and I found it because Eva Wilhelm was such a compelling narrator that I just wanted to hear her more, and then it opened up this amazing story series. If you were going to recommend someone read or listen to a book narrated by someone other than you or Ray, whom would you recommend?
That's such a hard question. So
Of
I'm
all of your friends, who do you like the best?
they're all the best. So in addition to Ray, I'm a huge Scott Brick fan, and have been for a long, long time as well. And so, like you with Eva, anytime I see a Scott Brick novel come out, audiobook come out, or a Ray Porter book come out, it's an automatic buy for me. It doesn't matter what it is, what genre it is. Usually, the two of them are in the genres that I like to listen to most often anyway, the thrillers or actions and things like that. So, the and then R.C. Bray is also another one of my favorites. And now I've forgotten what the question was.
Talk about all the people you like from now to the end of the recording.
How much time do you have?
Here's a different one. What was the last thing that you read or listened to that you would really recommend we add to our to be read list?
Oh my gosh, easy. The Joe Ledger series by Jonathan Mayberry, narrated by Ray Porter. I think he just released in February, like, I don't know, a lot of books in the series, maybe 10, 12 books in the series. I've listened to the series probably 3 times, because it's so good. And it's in the vein of a lot of the work that I want to do, that I want to continue doing, and thrillers. But the thrillers that Jonathan writes they've got a really cool kind of a paranormal or supernatural kind of twist to them. And they're so well written and so well performed by Ray that those are perennial on my perennial repeat list. And right now I am listening for the 4th time, maybe the 5th time. In addition to reading this series, I'm also listening. I also love the audiobook performance, and so I'm listening. I think this is the 4th time through the series. I'm in book 4 now of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, and Jim Marsters. I'm blanking out.
James
Marsters. Thank you. His friends call him Jim, so Jim Marsters. Marsters does such an amazing job on that entire series, and
that series is how I found out that James isn't British, because I only knew him through Buffy.
Right?
Is he not British? He's say outing myself. Oh wow, he does a compelling British accent.
He's all right. He's pretty good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, without question, without any hesitation, I recommend Dresden and I recommend Joe Ledger.
So you mentioned thriller, which I'm excited about because we haven't had an opportunity to talk about a lot of thriller projects or like I think Cilia's Diet is something like 98% science fiction and fantasy, and the ones that you've mentioned have a touch of that. But I am curious. You mentioned your science fiction and fantasy like book DNA items. Is there like a foundational thriller series that also kind of entered into that Hall of Fame for you?
Yep, absolutely. Probably starting off with Mitch Rapp's series. Oh, I'm blanking on the main character now. Oh, I hate when I do this. Mitch Rapp is Vince Flynn does the Mitch Rapp series. Mitch Rapp is the main character.
Okay.
And those paperbacks have been well worn many times through. And also the Scott Harvath series by Scott. I'm horrible. He's really good. Just take.
I think anytime you have to remember a name, the chances are
it's horrible. So yeah, and then there's also the Matthew Riley series.
By Brad Thor.
Brad Thor, thank you. Matthew Riley also writes a really cool series of thriller books. Scarecrow among them, Ice Station, Zebra, a few others that are really, really good. And kind of those three main series absolutely made up my thriller DNA from a very early age.
So if we were going to pitch reading more thrillers to somebody who doesn't read a lot of thrillers, what are the aspects of the genre that excite you as an audience member that kind of make you go like, yeah, and want to go back? Is it where in the story is it? A lot of these are series books with a protagonist that returns.
Yes.
Is that part of it, or is that just
that's definitely part of it. Another part that really attracts me to those books is the parts that aren't thrilling.
Okay.
In each of the books, the comedy, the lighthearted moments, the emotional moments, the ones that tie you into the main character and make you believe that they're a real person who's just trying to find his way through this horrible scenario or whatever he's trying to get through, and you're there right alongside him, rooting for him. That's what draws me into those types of stories every time. Kind of the everyday kind of guy. And Reacher, oh my God, Reacher. How do I forget Reacher? Yeah, that's another one. So another one with all the whole paperbacks in our bookshelves, well worn for sure. So, yeah. So many. There's so many out there. It's like picking your favorite kid, and they're not even my kids. So...
I, as a writer, I find the fusion of thriller or mystery or other, anything horror into science fiction and fantasy to be really compelling. And obviously Jim Butcher has shown that that you can take that kind of is that a thriller archetype, or is that more of a series mystery archetype? Or
I
is
think
that
it started as a more noir detective-ish, and then it took a strong left turn.
I mean, officially it's urban fantasy, but it's like you say, it's definitely in the detective. He's a detective. That's what he is.
Right.
He's a wizard and a detective, and that's kind of, so he's always trying to solve these mysteries and figure out who the bad guy is. And in the midst of doing that, he runs into all these fun little
supernatural
side quests. So yeah.
The closest I ever got to reading thrillers was a phase with Michael Crichton, of course, and he's more episodic, right? He doesn't have the long running series, but he has, of course, Jurassic Park and the Andromeda Strain and things like that. Do you classify those as thriller, or are they kind of their own little science fiction?
I call those thriller for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely have a thriller aspect to them, but I mean, like Jurassic Park, that's a very strong sci-fi aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
Kind of a combination of the two genres, a mesh.
And
commercially
Erik,
successful might be
well,
might be a subgenre for Michael Crichton. Just like thriller, science fiction. No, commercially successful.
There you go. That's the genre I want to write in.
Even though they're not at all thrillers, when you've been describing the different thriller books, what comes most strongly to mind for me is S.M. Stirling's different series. He has two interrelated series where the first one is kind of this alternate time travel piece where there's a group of people that all of a sudden get transported back in time and they then have to navigate it. And his other series is taking place now after the event that created that time jump, and is everyone else dealing with basically a post-apocalyptic world because no ignition that could shoot a bullet or higher is possible in the physics. The physics of the world has changed and society collapses.
Wow.
And it's not a thriller in that there's some sort of mystery or thing, but the level of tension, something happened and people have to navigate it and reconstruct what they know of the world, kind of fits in that place in my brain where thrillers go.
I want to know. That sounds fascinating. So I'm gonna have to look that up. S.M. Stirling. I don't.
Yes.
The name
SM
sounds really
Sterling.
familiar. I don't think I've read anything.
So the first one in the time travel side one is Island in the Sea of Time. And the reason I found him was because, I'm going to double check to make sure I do not biff this. The first one is Dies the Fire in the like contemporary alt series, and it takes place in Oregon, in the Mid Valley in the Salem area. And so I first picked it up because of that, and myself and my offspring got totally wrapped up in it.
That's cool. I will definitely check them out. He's done some stuff with Em McCaffrey, I see. That's kind of cool.
Maybe another point of enticement for Cylia.
It's true.
Gary, do you have a like a dramatic background? Did you do either for professional or for personal or creative? Did you do theater or anything like that?
I have, before I started this career in 2017, I had absolutely zero experience in the performing arts. In the dramatic arts. I was a musician, and still kind of dabble a little bit. I did high school.
That seems like those skills kind of transfer to a certain degree.
A little bit. Yeah, sure. Why not?
I mean, you gotta stand in front of a crowd. You got to do a little bit of patter, and you gotta, you have to. There is a presentation aspect of it,
For sure.
And I know in a lot. I mean, I imagine, I don't know what kind of magician, but a lot of magicians I know rely on.
Musician, not much.
Musician. Did I say? Oh gosh! Wow.
I've always wanted to be a magician, but
I'm introducing
sadly,
like a whole different.
It wasn't in my wheelhouse. No, musician. I did a lot of. I went through all junior high and high school and college, played bands and symphonies, and then picked up guitar and piano afterwards. And so I've got that kind of creative aspect that kind of sits in the back of my head. So I think that, and there's a lot of parallels in music performance as there are to acting, for sure. You have to, in a similar way, you've got a sheet of music, a sheet of notes and marks on the music that you have to perform and bring out the emotions from. So
right,
and that's
and so
many in narration.
So many musical performances are also telling a story.
Absolutely.
The one I always recommend to people for a concept album is Hadestown, which then went to Broadway.
It's my daughter's favorite musical. I haven't yet to see it, but I've heard some of the music. She and my wife have seen it like 3 times, I think, and they just rave about it. So yeah, but you're right. There's absolutely a storytelling aspect to music and an emotional aspect to music, and the ones who do it well know how to suss out all the little nuances in their performance.
I think one of the reasons that I ask is because I've personally found that there is something about the real-time adjustments that you have to make when you're doing some sort of a performance in front of an audience, where you're like, well, this is working, so I'm going to do more of that, or this is not working, so I'm going to do less of that.
The audience feedback.
Where if you're doing it right, like the audience doesn't realize that you're calibrating for it, but you're sort of you've developed a certain amount of skill at kind of doing that, and you could see that like stand-up comedians, I think, are a really interesting use case, but they're like a very interesting like example of storytelling, and that you'll like, in particular, if you find stand-up comics that talk about their process, where they go out and they do the same material, but they hit it slightly differently based upon crowd feedback, or they make various other alterations, and I find that those skills those performance skills can really translate to the less audience-facing stuff.
For
like
sure.
when you don't have to, when you're typing on the page and you don't have the audience there to give you that calibration, or when you're recording from a home audio setup. You just have to kind of rely upon those experiences and those instincts that you've built up a little bit with that crowd work.
Yeah, I mean, as a narrator who works 99% on my own, isolated, I wear multiple hats. I wear the actor hat, obviously, but I also wear that director hat that is listening to each line, each scene, each performance, and trying to figure out, well, is that following the arc of the story? Is that following that character? Is that bringing out the right emotions at the right pace and the right emphasis? So there's absolutely that aspect that you don't have the feedback obviously from an audience, but you still have that internal feedback that I think gives you that cues to readjust and readjust your course or take a little different tack on it.
Yep.
So Gary, one of Erik's goals for our first season, probably for every season, but for particularly our first season of this podcast, is to get me to like horror, or to at least admit that I like it. And so
yes,
you haven't brought up that genre yet, and Erik is a horror writer.
And
but...
I was thinking in the back of my head, I need to mention that too, because that is part of my DNA as well. And right.
Tell me your DNA, and then give me a recommendation of how I can ease in something that you think I would like.
So, DNA wise, Anne Rice, vampire.
Good
Interview
stuff.
with a Vampire.
Is she horror though? I've read almost all of her books.
You have? I would classify them as horror.
For sure. I mean, like, I think her, I would say at the very least, Rice's Vampire Chronicles are considerably, like, you could make an argument that,
I mean, they're not.
I remember reading some of the Mayfair Witches stuff and thinking, like, well, the story beats are a little bit more romance, and it is a little bit more romance forward.
Mayfair Witches is way creepier to me than Vampire Lestat or Interview with the Vampire or...
We get back to like your definitions of horror are fascinating to me, because like I mean, first of all,
there was
just fundamentally where
impregnation by a ghost in Mayfair Witches, to me that is horrific.
And you still read it, but so my point with my point with Anne Rice is, at some point you went into a library or a bookstore. What section were those books in?
Science fiction.
Really?
Yeah.
They put Anne Rice in science fiction.
Yeah.
They put Anne Rice in science. I'm surprised by that.
That
honestly.
Surprises me as well. Yeah.
I mean, I know that, like, for me, like, I have a very distinct memory of reading Fangoria magazine, which is like a horror movie magazine, and I was a big Fangoria reader right around when Interview with the Vampire, the original Tom Cruise adaptation, was coming out, and that was all over Fangoria, and that was not all over any of the science fiction and fantasy magazines. you know like that is.
Now that I'm trying to picture, so I grew up in a smaller town in the Portland suburbs, and I think it said science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and it was all lumped into one section.
Okay, so maybe there's a lot of slipperiness that happened there. That's yeah. Have either of you watched the new AMC adaptation for Interview with Vampire? Yeah. See, again, how can you have watched it and be like, I don't like horror, but that's such a good show. It's horror. It is 100% horror. The irony is that I think some of the thriller books that like some of the stuff that's on that thriller angle is probably closer to what you're uncomfortable with than some of the stuff that's in the horror side, because the Hannibal Lecter and all that's all thriller, and all those serial killer books, those are all in the thriller section.
That's not horror? See, I would have mentally tagged those as horror.
again, in the library, in the bookstore, they're going to put those in the thriller section. You're not going to find Thomas Harris in the horror section.
Librarians know. So
they may not put it in like if they don't have a thriller section, it may be under like, well, there's usually a thriller section. There's usually a thriller suspense section.
Yeah.
But if they don't put that stuff in thriller suspense, it's just in like the commercially successful section. You can make money putting these books out section of the bookstore.
New genre, right? Everyone's going to write for it,
Right?
All right. Knowing that my horror meter may be miscalibrated, so I don't mind gore. I don't mind vampires. Clearly, I think the horror that squicks me out is like Misery by Stephen King.
Oh,
more of a thriller than a horror book.
It felt like very torture and lack of agency, and like for no good reason this person is doing terrible things to a person. Calibrating for those things, what do you think I should read knowing it's horror going in to get me to like it?
That's a tough one, because everything that comes to mind probably is on the other side of that fence.
You could also throw out things that, you can also throw out suggestions for me. Yeah.
I love Stephen King, obviously, and
yeah.
Probably everything I've read from Stephen King is absolutely top notch. Put a pin in that because I want to come back to it. But also Clive Barker is a huge.
Oh, yeah.
I love his work. But I'm not sure you would really like that either. So I don't know. That's a hard one.
I bounced off one of his because the cover was so pretty, and I really wanted to like it, and then I started reading it, and I'm like, I don't think this is for me. It was Imagica.
See, I love that book, and I've actually I have a small quest, which is to find a copy of it because I can't find it at the local bookstores. I think they're putting out a new edition, or there's something going on where it's not like. At one point, they put it out in like a single volume, and then I saw that they split it into two.
Oh.
And I've been looking to see if I think I saw that they may be reissuing it, but I remember I have not read that book since I was very young, probably too young. But I remember loving it, and I would say Magic is actually more of it was when Clive Barker was really starting to go pretty fantasy. Like, there's a lot of new weird fantasy in Imagica, as I recall. But
yeah,
I need to find a copy so I can reread it.
It was in the 90s. It's been a minute. I might need to revisit.
Yeah. Yeah, I got nothing for you. Sorry.
Give Erik a recommendation.
No, I mean we're already copacetic on the Clive Barker. I'm on board. Like I have been over the last year. I've been every time I go into a bookstore, I've been going to the horror section and looking to see what Clive Barker they have in stock, because again, I think that he's in between the conversation right now. Like, I don't think that he was huge in the early to mid 90s, but I think right now, maybe people are not finding Clive Barker, and I would like to be a person that can walk up like a Clive Barker. You heard the good news about the Hellbound Heart. Can I talk to you about Weave World? And I can hold up books door to door. I mean, that stuff's great. Have you seen Clive Barker's graphic art, Cylia?
I think I have.
His art, well, he's illustrated a few things. I think he illustrated, I want to say it was Operat, is how it's pronounced. It was like a book that he did, and I think he illustrated all of it. But he's generally he's done a lot of art, and his art is what you might expect from Clive Barker, which is to say that it's fantastic and creepy, and kind of.
I'm looking at the cover of it right now, and
yeah.
indeed, It is fantastic and creepy.
Yeah, that is the best way to describe it.
I love it.
Oh, it's a young adult fantasy novel.
Yeah, no, and he also, he did some, there's a book I remember really adoring that I read that was targeted towards a younger audience called The Thief of Always. When I was younger, weirdly, again, I'd read like his much more hardcore adult stuff, and then I read The Thief of Always, and I just really liked it. And there was a short period of time where I think there were rumors that they were going to adapt it into like an animated movie, and I was really excited about it. But it's good stuff. There's edges of Clive Barker that you should not venture into, Cylia, but there's some stuff that's probably safe.
I'll need to vet it. I'll need to run it through you first.
I would say anything that's explicitly marked as like a young adult or teen is probably safer.
You're probably all right. Yeah.
I would not. Again,
I
would not.
Books of Blood, Volume 1.
I would not read Books of Blood for you. I would not choose that journey for you. I haven't read the entire series of the Books of Blood, but I've read a bunch of it, and because several of his movies are based on, or several of the movies that they've made out of Clive Barker's work have been based upon stories from the Books of Blood, and there's some fucked up stuff in there. I mean, it's my kind of fucked up, but it's there's a story called The Midnight Meat Train, which is a really weird and disturbing story. And I think they did make that into a movie. But yeah, just from the title, trust your instincts on that. Trust your instincts on that. But people that are listening to this podcast that want to end up becoming future guests or want to like interact with us on social media, nerd out about Clive Barker with me because I'm there for
it. Gary, you put a pin in Stephen King.
Oh yes. So we're talking Stephen King specifically about horror, and I'm going to turn the conversation back to one of my favorite topics, which is audiobooks. I don't know if we've talked about. Yeah, I think we kind of brushed on my favorite audiobooks. Obviously, Project Hail Mary, the Dresden Files. I've got two books that are at the absolute top of my list for all-time favorites. One of them is Project Hail Mary, and the other one is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. It is not horror, it's fantasy, and it is one of the I forget who performs it, but it is one of the best written. I mean, obviously it's well written because it's Stephen King, but the performance by, what is his name? Seth Newman.
Seth.
Yes.
Okay. I was gonna.
Is absolutely spellbinding. It's so engrossing, so engaging, so well performed that it lives at the top of my list. So I just wanted to get that out there for anybody who's listening and looking for recommendations. Right there.
As you might imagine, Stephen King can get some pretty incredible audiobook productions.
He can, for sure.
I just recently listened to I think it's a new edition of it. I can't imagine it's anyway of The Shining, narrated by Campbell Scott, and like I was blown away.
Really,
his narration was. Because I'm familiar with Campbell Scott as like an actor from the 90s, and maybe before and maybe after, certainly before and a little bit after. But like I'm thinking of him as like the train guy in the movie Singles. I don't know if that's dating me, that particular movie reference.
The
but
train guy.
He's his job in the movie is that he's trying to generate what he calls super train to like get people to commute by train more often.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
He's one of the leads of the movie.
God, he was in that.
Yeah. No, he's like the main romantic lead, I guess.
Yeah.
And so like that was my. He's a great actor.
I didn't know he did any audiobooks though. That's really.
He has started doing. I don't know how many he's done, but he started doing some audiobooks. And my wife got The Shining, and she was like listening to it, and I'm like, is that Campbell Scott? Because apparently I can pick out Campbell Scott's voice is something that I've learned about myself. Because he does have a very particular, like. I don't know, there's something very specific about his voice that I could recognize. But what was really impressive about The Shining is that that's a book where there's a lot of subtext anger and emotion that Campbell Scott, I think, can pull off like this intensity. Anyway, that's another recent audiobook that. Sorry, I accidentally muted myself there. That's an audiobook that I enjoyed. I think you might like The Shining as a horror novel, Cylia, because it's not extremely horror. Even the movie, even the Kubrick movie, I think is more overtly horror than
So I've watched bits of the Kubrick movie, not the full thing. So my spouse is a huge horror fan, has watched The Shining, and recently watched the TV show that was like a sequel to it. And so, like, he'd be watching it, and I'd be working, I'd watch it, and I'd have him pause. I'm like, okay, what's happening here? And so he basically gives me the Reader's Digest version of a lot of these shows. So I know enough about like, The Shine is interesting to me, the, like, mental aspects of it, the concept of ghosts and all of those pieces. The here's Johnny scene is pretty intense.
That is that is not present in that way in the book.
Interesting.
And I would say that the book is a slower, deeper burn, which is weird because The Shining by Kubrick is probably one of my all-time favorite horror movies. And somebody once asked me, like, Eric, what's like a comfort movie that you watch? And I was like, without any hesitation, I was like, oh, The Shining. Like, if I'm kind of sad or like I'm having a down day, I'm like, I'm gonna watch The Shining. The Shining, like, just gonna get like it's wintry, I really like the Kubrick movie, but the book is a different animal, and it's still good. But because of that, I think that if the overt horror of the movie was off-putting, I think the book is much more your speed. Mm-hmm. But and I looked it up, and apparently Campbell Scott's done a bunch of audiobook narration from Ernest Hemingway to other Stephen King, and apparently he's done an edition of Oryx and Crake, which is kind of interesting and fascinating. I'm pretty sure I listened to the audiobook of that, and it was not narrated by Campbell Scott. Once Upon a Time by Oryx and Crake. Are you not familiar with this book by Margaret Atwood? Mm-mm. Wow. Okay. I'm surprised because I would say Oryx and Crake is kind of it's definitely a science. Margaret Atwood doesn't consider it science fiction, I believe, and I respect Margaret Atwood's decision to not self-identify as a speculative author. I really, truly do. But it's a science fiction novel. Like, Margaret Atwood may not be like a science fiction author, and maybe she didn't consider Oryx and Crake to be a sci-fi book, but it's about like weird genetic engineering and like a post-apocalyptic future. It is a science fiction.
I mean, I've read Handmaid's Tale, and I would mentally classify it as dystopian horror. And
she does not consider it speculative. She puts it in a different category. And again, I'm there for like Margaret Atwood doesn't want to be in that category. That's fine, but like Margaret Atwood doesn't have to listen right now when I say it's a science fiction.
Well, she's in the very commercially successful category.
Yeah, right. She's in the award-winning author that's had a TV adaptation and doesn't really have to worry.
Yeah, totally different
section of the bookstore. Anyway, I thought Oryx and you would know Oryx and Crake. I didn't mean to go off on like a full tangent there.
It's on my list.
Literally, that's the entire deal with our podcast is book tangents.
It was recommended to me at one point. Oryx and Crake was recommended to me at one point when I was having a difficult time finding a book that I was excited about. And somebody said, give this a shot. And it was good. And I'm thinking about it now and some of the plot elements. You may not like it.
I know that I'm thinking.
After all this build-up.
Well, there's a pretty substantial subplot that involves what's the right terminology for this? Human trafficking. I'm going to go with that. Like there is a whole human trafficking subplot, which is more about the gender dynamics of it and some of the other stuff. So therefore, it kind of goes into some dark places. But I think it's a good book, but it's maybe not a pleasant book to read.
Trigger warnings apply.
There you go.
Yeah, trigger warnings apply. So you mentioned that you listen to a lot of books through your ears. Are there books where you do still seek out like a hard copy intentionally, or is it just sort of as it happens? I mean, obviously you have a professional reason to kind of do mostly audiobooks, but are there books where you're like, no, I only want to read Tolkien in paper or something like that?
There is definitely that desire.
Okay.
There not necessarily is that time in my life to be able to indulge myself like that. But absolutely. I mean, I still have a nice library that I'm very proud of, and I love looking at all the books that I used to read and thinking, I'll come back to you sometime. But
I still love you.
I still love you. I haven't abandoned you.
So you maintained the love for
Oh, absolutely.
reading.
I love books.
Okay.
Books, I mean, yeah, there's nothing like holding a good book in your hand and smelling it and just there's nothing like it in the world. And as much as I love audiobooks and as much as it's a part of my life right now, my first love is holding a book in my hand and holding the flashlight as I'm sitting in bed so I can read it at night and all that. That's just part of my DNA.
If I really love a book, I'll get multiple versions of it. Like, I'll need the hard copy and the paperback and the audiobook. And I really want to make sure to, like, support it in all these ways. And then I'll get extra copies so that I can give them to people.
See, you're a good friend. That's nice.
She's kind of like a drug dealer.
First one's free.
Yeah, just like...
I don't have an addiction. I could stop anytime. I just don't want to.
At the point when you start buying copies to distribute, I think they call that... I think that takes it above like the self-use.
Possession with an intent to distribute. I know who I am.
There you go.
Is there a genre breakdown for the books that you're consuming, Gary? Do you how does it break down?
For pleasure?
Yeah, for pleasure, I would guess more than professional.
75% thrillers, 25% other.
Okay.
And the other right now is I'm consumed with Dresden again, so that's urban fantasy, but that may vary from time to time. But yeah, I mean, as much as I grew up on science fiction and fantasy and pseudo science fiction with dragons, I feed myself with thrillers more than anything else these days because I love the genre. I absolutely love it, and that's the primary focus of my work, and that's absolutely the primary focus of my pleasure.
I've asked guests before a similar question, but I'm going to word it a little bit differently. When you're, it sounds like you do a fair amount of rereading, and you do an amount of reading in a series. Mm-hmm. When you're reading, are you looking for the stories for pleasure? To be clear, are you looking for the story to bring you comfort and familiarity, or to bring, like shock and surprise, or some combination?
More comfort and familiarity. The stories that I return to over and over again are ones that I do so because I love them. I love the stories. I love the performance. So it's like a warm blanket around me.
I think so. With urban fantasy, there's a lot of narrators that come to mind. Obviously, Shannon Maguire, Patricia Briggs, Charlene Harris. I feel like there's some newer books that I would classify as urban fantasy, but may not hit all the tropes. So I'm thinking of N.K. Jemison's The City We Became. Or the other one I was thinking about was Green Bone Saga by Fonda Lee. And both of those, the cities are so central to the narrative that to me they have to be urban fantasy. But I don't know that others would agree. Like, what, to your mind, what makes it urban fantasy versus, aside from it not being in a, even Michelle Segarra West's Chronicles of this Cylia is secondary world, and I would classify that as urban fantasy. So, like, what is it that makes it? Does it just have to take place in a city and there's magic? Like, what makes it urban fantasy to you?
For me, urban fantasy, and this is my definition, purely my definition, but for me, what makes a good urban fantasy is fantastical elements, magic mostly, set in the real world. It doesn't have to be urban. It doesn't have to be a city. But it has to be right now. I could look down the street and open a newspaper and find a story about a wizard or whatever. That's to me that's where I get the joy out of reading urban fantasy.
So not secondary world, like our world
plus
fantastical.
Yep, for sure. Yep.
I think
I would classify. I would even go as far as classify Harry Potter as urban fantasy because it's in our world, but it's got those magical elements. I feel
like a lot of traditional urban fantasy, Dresden Files, I think is the peak example. Also do some of that genre fusing of bringing in like a thriller or a mystery.
Oh, for sure.
Or some of that like more. I want to say I'm going to use the term procedural, but I don't know if that's fair or right. Like sometimes you'll see books where I would consider a book if somebody were to be like this is a law firm where all the lawyers are vampires. I would be like that's probably urban fantasy.
It's borderline Max Gladstone.
Right. But isn't Max Gladstone's writing secondary world, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of primary world that doesn't fit that formula of a proceduralist would be most of Charles DeLint's work. So he writes fairy stories in the city where, like, what if that street kid with green hair, what if they don't dye their hair green?
Oh, interesting.
Well, and
since like the 80s.
Well, and there's the question mark, which is just and this is like somebody gets paid a lot of money and has many degrees and probably certifications from a marketing background to decide how to categorize these things, about what constitutes urban fantasy versus contemporary fantasy or fantasy in an urban or first world. I don't know if that's the terminology. I know secondary world, but is that like earth-based? I had an interesting conversation with my agent about it, which is that his perspective was that urban fantasy drew readers that were both mystery or thriller readers and fantasy readers. It kind of attracted them over to reading urban fantasy. Right. And then when the urban fantasy kind of the genre boom started to wane a bit, they stayed readers, but they kind of gravitated back to their prior affiliations. And he contrasted this with romantasy readers, which he does not think are being made up of romance readers and fantasy readers joining together to kind of moving over. He thinks romantasy readers are actually new readers, entirely unique readers entering into the ecosystem that have not necessarily had prior genre affiliations.
That's interesting.
I know that he has a tremendous amount of professional background in this, so I kind of give him credit for it. Like, I believe him, but I don't know what justifies that. But it was an interesting thing to consider.
I'll say that's not my experience with people that I personally know who read romantasy.
Well, I think that
people who entered it from the romance or from the fantasy aspect of it.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure that there are examples of that, but it's an interesting. People will always be fascinated by
from like the population versus the individual perspective.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, and I don't know what they classify them as, but to me, it's very much urban fantasy. Are the the Phoenix Horde trilogy by Julia V and Ken Pavel. The Ebony Gate is the first one, and Blood Jade is the second one. Yeah,
the Phoenix Horde is the right series.
The Phoenix Horde. I would classify that as fantasy. I would encourage it. If you like Dresden, Gary, I think if you take the Dresden Files and then you throw in like a little bit of like Jade City or that sort of there's a like Chinese mythology aspect to it. I think you would find that to be a really satisfying series to dive into. And I would say this to our listeners as well. Like if you're enjoying Jim Butcher and you've run out of Jim Butcher books,
just listen to them again.
Well, you can listen to them again for sure. Definitely do that. But also, like, I think in my opinion, they're kind of those two authors are kind of doing a really good job of inheriting some of that urban fantasy crown.
Natalie did them. Of course, they're good. Yeah.
And I listened to the audiobooks. I haven't read the third one yet. I'm waiting for it to come out in paperback, which I think is this month. And by this month I mean May.
It's great.
I believe it. But I've got signed copies of the first two in paperback, and I want to complete my set.
Oh, nice.
So I'm waiting for the trade release so that I can get them signed. But I read my method, which there are a couple of things that I'm going to mention that are going to offend or confuse audiobook narrators. One is that my method of reading, I tend to prefer to read. I swap back and forth. Like if I'm listening, I'll listen to a book in the car, or I'll listen to a book while I'm on the treadmill, and then I prefer to read the book in its physical form.
Like in the middle of the book, one chapter.
Yep,
reading
one chapter at a time. I literally sometimes open up the app that I'm listening to the audiobook on my phone to see what chapter it is. And occasionally, for books that are not don't give me easy chapters like that, I have to like estimate where I am in the book based upon like percentages or time. And then I seriously, I will open up the book and I will flip through until I find the section. And that's a weird way that I do it, but it really works for me. But so I did that with both of the Ebony Gate and Blood Jade, and so I got to experience. It gives me the best of both worlds. Like I get that like kid with a flashlight experience of reading the book.
Yeah.
When I can't, like, particularly those books which are really pacey and they'll hit like an action like momentum, and you're like, well, I can't
stop now.
I have to continue to read this until I'm done with it. And in those kind of things, like I prefer to read it because I can't stop myself from reading at like super speed. But then I can also get the audiobook experience. What, as an audiobook narrator, is your reaction to this heresy of mine?
I'm going to plead the fifth.
To be clear, I think it's insane.
No, I think it's each to their own. I hear similar conversations about listeners' speed preference for audiobooks, and you know what? Each to their own. Any way somebody wants to enjoy a book, whether it's reading, whether it's listening at 5 times speed, whether it's swapping back and forth, as long as you get to enjoy the book, good on you. I think that's...
You're too nice. That is insanity. If you are listening to an audiobook at more than 1.0 speed, you're missing crucial decibels of the narrator and pacing choices they're doing.
I totally agree.
I
totally agree.
I do love and support my partner Erik, and I do think he's insane for swapping back and forth.
So what I just gave you was my PC response.
Yes,
Right,
great.
right.
The uncensored response is, "You're fucking crazy, dude." How do you do that? Seriously.
Look, I think I'm normal because I have at least 2 to 3 books going at any single time.
See, that's crazy.
But I keep the streams separate because I'll have a hard copy, an ebook, and an audiobook, and by having them in those separate formats,
How do you
the
choose?
plots stay straight in my head.
How do you choose what to read when?
Vibes.
Vibes. Oh,
And usually logistical, like, oh, I need to go do a chore, so audiobook's going to be easier for me. Or it's super late at night and I don't want to turn on the light and wake up my spouse, so ebook's going to be the thing that is backlit and I can...
And I kind of do the same thing myself, because I'm always prepping one book and I'm recording another book and I'm listening to another book. So it's really not that different. So,
normal.
Okay, normal. I'll give that. Normal.
we said no negative vibes and we're just roasting Erik now. But I mean, I do think, to your point, Erik, it means that you can continue the through line narrative and keep up with the book despite whatever else is going on in your life.
Yeah.
And from that utilitarian standpoint, I think that's very clever. I just would never ever do it.
I mean, I also do listen to audiobooks at a faster speed, which I know, again, clunk, as Cylia sits down, I know.
We need to have a discussion.
I mean, like I said, each to their own, but as a narrator, as an artist, as an actor, I put a lot of effort and work into making sure the pacing and the space between the empty space is meaningful. And if somebody decides to listen at a greater speed than the way I performed it, more power to them, but know that you may be missing a lot of nuance.
Yeah, I mean, even as I recognize as a writer, I have no control over how somebody is going to read my work. And I've had people that will, they tell me that they explicitly only read in 5-minute increments. And I'm like,
what? No.
I had a friend that said, I get 5 minutes with a book at a time. And I was just like, I will never be able to sustain, I can never pace my writing that way. When I'm writing, I generally think about the pacing. I try to build in chapter breaks or section breaks to give people a satisfying amount that's modular that they can add. So 15 minutes to read a chapter, 30 minutes to read a chapter. I usually try to avoid going over something that I think would take somebody more than half an hour to read, just simply because I don't want somebody to have to put it down in the middle because of logistical reasons.
Wait, do you guys stop reading at the end of chapters?
Oh, wait.
I don't.
Stop at, yes. Stop in the middle?
No.
Never. I cannot stop in the middle of a chapter. I have to finish.
Where do you stop? Do you just not stop? Is that the trick?
I mean, the secret is I'm always reading, Erik.
No, but if you have a book that's got 40 chapters, are you not stopping at chapter intervals?
No.
What?
I just stop when I need to stop.
What? In the middle of a chapter?
Yeah.
I thought you were crazy.
Yeah. Now I have something to say you're weird about. Do you have to go back and read the prior page? I mean, because it's
just all right up in there.
I don't get that at all. That's horrifying to me.
I respect
Seriously.
your ways, even as I don't understand them.
Wow.
Look, it's worked for my reading pace so far.
True, I get that. And then there's another point, which is I've had people who read at a pace that I just find baffling. People who can read something 120 pages in an hour, which I think if I was held at gunpoint, I could probably do. But like my comfortable reading pace is about a page a minute. Like that's my happy place. Now it will speed up as the book gets its hooks into me, and I'm eager to see the plot developments. But anybody that can read, I have a friend, good friend, who mentions that he reads, the way he reads is he says, I don't hear the words in my head. Like he can read he reads at a particular speed, and then there will never be any words. And I think it's because he did some training as a speed reader. Okay. And there's a way when you're speed reading where rather than having like an auditory,
you like read the page at a time.
You're having like instead of having like an internal auditory experience, he's having a purely visual experience. And they said, well, how does that work when there's an author that's like trying to do stuff with, like myself, trying to do stuff with like sound or delivery of something, so that like you can kind of pick up like the more complicated stuff. You know, the fascinating thing about stories is that if you go back far enough, they started as an oral tradition and then they became a written tradition, and now we've taken them back to an oral tradition again to a certain degree. But they were that oral tradition, that auditory element for me is always there in this story.
When I was reading for pleasure before I got into this industry, I was a really slow reader. My wife and I would be reading the same book, and she would be chapters ahead of me because I would read internally. I would voice every sentence, every word, every pause, and maybe that kind of led to my career now. Is I was doing that internally for as long as I can remember, because I wanted to just savor the story. So that's how my mind processed it. It's always been at a very deliberate pace inside my head.
I might need to measure my reading speed. I don't know if I've necessarily ever done that. And I think I'm somewhere in between there, because I definitely read all of it. And when I recall things, I actually, it's very difficult for me to quote, because I just remember, it's like a movie in my head.
Yeah. And for me, I see the words on the page. When I recall a scene or whatever, I'm seeing the words on the page in addition to
that's
how it plays
definitely
back.
Different than me.
Yeah.
Well, and same for me.
Brains are weird and cool.
They are weird and cool.
But I like your answer, Gary, even if it's like the nice answer, which is that whatever way you want to consume a book.
And that's the bottom line. As long as people are enjoying the book, who's to say who's right? Or I'm not going to stomp on somebody's garden just because they do it differently than me.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason we can tease each other is because we're friends. But yes,
Yeah.
I mean, if it gets you reading a story, that's the important part.
Absolutely. Yeah. But for you listeners out there listening to my book, what speed? Or whatever. Whatever.
I've been told. I'll bear that in mind. I do think about the karma of people listening to this podcast at like 1.5 or 2 times speed, and like making me sound slightly like a munchkin, or what is it? The chipmunks. So that's
and then I get up to the mosquito decibel.
Yeah, and that's my karma, I think.
There you go.
I mean, what you were saying, Gary, about the spaces between the words, that brings me back to your origin as a musician, right? Because music isn't just the notes you play, it's the space between them.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. That's where the good stuff is, I think.
It's all about the spaces between.
It's all about the spaces between. Ooh, that's a good tagline. I like that.
Yeah, we might just name this episode after that.
All right. We have had such an amazing time talking to you. I'm so grateful that you're part of our origin story, Gary, and that you agreed to come and talk with us about the books and stories and the pieces that are important to you.
It's an honor. It truly is. I love this whole scene. I love being part of this little group between the three of us. I love how it all came together, and that I was kind of part of it. And I'm truly, truly grateful. Thank you.
It's been great having you on. Okay. Until next time, folks. You've been listening to Connect the Plots with Cylia and Erik. Thanks. Please connect with us on social media. We're Connect the Plots Pod on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. You can also support us and gain access to exclusive content on our Patreon. That's at patreon.com/Connect the Plots Pod, all spelled out. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.